She told everyone I was a failure, and laughed in my face. But what happened next changed everything. It's under 20 words, immediately sets up conflict, humiliation, and intrigue, and makes viewers want to know what happened next. The story begins with the narrator at a family gathering, the kind of warm, bustling event that's supposed to feel comforting, but instead, it becomes a stage for his public humiliation. He notices the soft glow of overhead lights reflecting on polished wood tables, the faint scent of freshly baked bread and coffee filling the room. Laughter bubbles around him, voices blending into a hum of cheer, yet all he feels is the sharp sting of embarrassment. His wife, usually reserved in social settings, has decided to break that facade. With a smirk and an almost casual tone, she announces to everyone, friends, relatives, and neighbors, that he is a failure, that he cannot provide, and that they should not expect much from him. The narrator feels a cold jolt, his stomach twisting as he hears her words echo in the room. Each syllable lands like a small weight pressing down on his chest. He grips the edge of a chair, knuckles whitening, trying to steady the trembling in his hands. His throat feels tight, as though the words are lodged there, unspoken, choking him. He wants to say something, defend himself, but the words feel heavy, clumsy, and powerless in the face of her laughter. The warmth in the room, a light drizzle of social chatter, the hum of familiarity, turns sharp and alien. He notices the subtle glances of others, the polite half-smiles, the quiet shifting of weight from foot to foot. Some try to hide their discomfort, while others exchange knowing looks, confirming the humiliation he cannot escape. His body reacts before his mind can catch up, shoulders slump, jaw tightens, and he lowers his gaze to the floor. He feels a flush creeping across his cheeks, hot and prickling, a stark contrast to the cool air circulating from the open window. Memories of their earlier life together flash in his mind, moments of laughter, shared dreams, and quiet evenings where he felt respected and valued. Now, they feel distant, almost unreal, as if they belonged to someone else's story. The narrator's inner monologue runs wild, questions, doubts, and a gnawing ache of self-blame. He wonders if he truly is failing, if he has been blind to her growing contempt. The laughter continues, sharp and cutting, and he imagines himself shrinking, invisible, wishing the floor would swallow him whole. The sound of her voice, confident and unrepentant, clashes with the sympathetic murmurs of others in the room, amplifying his sense of isolation. Even the smallest details pierce him, the subtle click of her heels against the floor, the way her eyes sparkle with amusement, completely unaware of the storm she has unleashed in him. He notices the coarse texture of the table beneath his fingers, the slight hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen, the distant bark of a dog outside, each mundane sound a jarring contrast to the chaos of emotion inside. For the audience, this moment must feel painfully intimate. They should feel his humiliation, see the micro-expressions of shame and hurt, and begin to invest emotionally in his journey. The key here is to immerse viewers in his sensory world, from the tactile grip of the chair to the auditory sting of laughter, while planting the seeds of empathy and curiosity. How will he respond? Can he recover from this public betrayal? By the end of this part, the audience should feel the narrator's isolation sharply, sensing that he has been forced into a moment that will define the emotional journey to come. This is the quiet before the storm, a world that looks ordinary on the outside but feels unbearably heavy on the inside. After the crushing humiliation at the family gathering, the narrator retreats to the quiet of his apartment, seeking a sanctuary that feels like it should comfort him, but even the familiar space seems alien now. The soft hum of the refrigerator, usually background noise, feels louder than ever, echoing in the stillness. The ticking of the clock on the wall becomes a steady reminder that time is moving on, indifferent to his shame. He sinks into the couch, running a hand across its worn fabric, feeling the tiny imperfections of the cushions under his fingers, small, grounding sensations in the storm of his mind. He can't stop replaying the moment in his head, her laughter, sharp and effortless, how her words had cut through the cheerful chatter like a blade. The faces of the people around him blur together, their polite smiles now tainted by judgment. He recalls the subtle shift in posture when she spoke, how the air seemed to bend around her confidence, leaving him exposed. Each memory presses down, and he feels a deep ache in his chest, a mix of anger, hurt, and disbelief. His hands fidget, tracing patterns absent-mindedly on the coffee table. He notices the faint scratches on its surface, the coolness of the glass vase beside him, the slight weight of the remote in his hand. Every touch, every sensory detail, grounds him yet reminds him of his own fragility in this moment. He thinks about how much he has sacrificed, the late nights, the steady work, the quiet efforts to build a life, and now all of it feels invisible, mocked by the person he loves most. The apartment is quiet, yet the silence amplifies his thoughts. He hears the distant sounds of traffic outside, the soft rustle of leaves brushing against the window, and even the faint drip of a leaky faucet becomes a metronome for his inner turmoil. He curls into himself slightly, letting the weight of the day press down, feeling the sting of betrayal in every muscle. Memories of better times with his wife surface, gentle touches, shared laughter over small, private jokes, evenings spent in quiet companionship. The contrast between those moments and the recent humiliation is painful. He longs for her warmth but also feels the sharp divide that now separates them. The man he thought he was, the husband he tried to be, feels diminished, replaced by someone unworthy in her eyes. He whispers to himself, words of self-reassurance that feel hollow, "I'm not a failure. I'm not a failure." Yet the words seem to dissolve in the air before they can settle in his heart. He wraps a blanket around his shoulders, the fabric soft against his skin, as if the mere touch can provide a sliver of comfort. His eyes fall on small reminders of his life, books stacked on a shelf, a coffee mug still half full, a photo of a simpler, happier time, and he clings to them like anchors in a storm. For the audience, this scene must evoke intimate empathy. They should feel his vulnerability, his quiet despair, and the tension between longing for love and confronting betrayal. The focus is on sensory detail, touch, sound, and small gestures, to make his pain tangible. The audience experiences the slow, creeping realization that his life has been upended, and the internal conflict begins to build. How does he reclaim his dignity, and who will truly see him for who he is? By the end of this part, the narrator is emotionally exposed yet reflective, setting the stage for the first glimmer of hope in the next part, someone noticing his pain, offering empathy, and planting the seeds for emotional connection. After days of sitting with his humiliation and replaying every word, gesture, and glance from that fateful gathering, the narrator finds himself walking through the quiet streets near his apartment. The air is crisp, carrying the faint scent of rain on asphalt, and the world feels both heavy and strangely alive. Each step echoes softly against the pavement, matching the rhythmic beating of his heart, a mix of lingering shame and restless energy. He hadn't expected anyone to notice his pain. After all, he had been invisible in the very moment meant to define him, laughed at, belittled, dismissed. And yet, there she is, the confidante, the woman who had always seemed quietly aware of the subtle emotions around her. Perhaps it was a neighbor, a coworker, or someone who had attended the same gathering, someone whose presence now feels like sunlight breaking through clouds. She approaches with a soft, careful smile that is neither intrusive nor patronizing. Her voice is warm and steady, carrying a note of genuine concern as she greets him. "Hey, are you okay?" she asks. And for the first time in days, the narrator feels seen, not for what he lacks, but for what he truly is. They sit together on a nearby bench, the texture of the wooden slats rough beneath their hands, grounding them in the present moment. The distant hum of traffic fades into the background, replaced by the quiet rustle of leaves and the soft whisper of wind. She leans slightly forward, not too close, but just enough that he feels the comfort of her attention. There's a subtle energy in the space between them, a warmth that invites honesty without forcing it. Their conversation is tentative at first, measured. He struggles to articulate the storm inside him, shame, disbelief, self-doubt, but she listens without judgment. Her presence is steady, a calming counterpoint to the chaos he carries. Every gesture matters, the slight tilt of her head, the way her eyes soften when she speaks, the brief, reassuring touch of her hand on his forearm. Each small act is a balm, a reminder that not all people are blind to pain, that not every gaze is critical or mocking. The narrator notices things he hadn't before, the faint scent of her perfume, floral and grounded, comforting in its subtlety, the gentle inflection of her laughter, low and warm, when he cracks a dry joke, the way her hand lingers for a heartbeat longer than necessary before withdrawing. These small, sensory details prick at something deeper inside him, an awareness of connection, of trust, and perhaps something unspoken that neither of them names yet. For the audience, this moment is crucial. It introduces hope and tension simultaneously. They should feel the contrast between the narrator's prior isolation and the first genuine warmth he has encountered in days. There is no overt romance yet, but the slow-burn tension begins to take root through body language, lingering glances, and shared vulnerability. By the end of this scene, the narrator's world has subtly shifted. He is still processing pain, still carrying humiliation, but the presence of someone who truly notices him opens a door, one that leads toward understanding, trust, and the possibility of emotional intimacy. The audience senses that this connection may grow, shaping the trajectory of his journey from shame to self-worth, and possibly towards something more. Days have passed since the unexpected conversation on the bench, and the narrator finds himself acutely aware of the small details of life that once went unnoticed. Walking past familiar streets, entering his apartment, even brewing a cup of coffee, everything carries subtle reminders of connection, or the lack thereof. His mind, still tender from humiliation, now clings to the memory of her warmth, her gentle attentiveness. He begins to notice her in ways that feel both natural and unsettling. In casual encounters, at the grocery store, in the cafe they both frequent, or during a fleeting text conversation, she shows small acts of care, remembering his favorite drink, a light tease that draws a reluctant smile, or a soft check-in on how his day has gone. Each gesture is understated but precise, like a quiet thread weaving him back into a sense of self-worth. The narrator becomes a keen observer, not only of her, but of his own reactions. His chest tightens with a mix of anticipation and uncertainty whenever she approaches. He notices the way her eyes soften when she smiles, how her hand lingers ever so slightly when passing an item or gesturing toward him. These touches are innocent, YouTube-safe, yet they carry a weight he cannot ignore. Every accidental brush of fingers against his is a spark he cannot quite name. He watches how she interacts with others too, contrasting her warmth toward him with the casual confidence she extends elsewhere. The realization strikes him, she notices him in a way others do not. Her attentiveness is personal, intentional, yet never overtly demanding. It is in the small pauses, the shared silence that feels comfortable and intimate, the subtle alignment of her body toward him when they speak. Each moment is layered with tension, an unspoken conversation of glances and gestures. The narrator's internal monologue begins to take shape. He feels a mix of longing, admiration, and hesitation. Part of him wants to retreat into the safety of invisibility, fearing judgment or the weight of inappropriate desire, but another part is drawn irresistibly toward her presence. The warmth she radiates is a stark contrast to the cold sting of humiliation he experienced with his wife. He realizes that emotional intimacy is more compelling than any fleeting validation, it is steady, grounding, and profound. For the audience, this part emphasizes slow-burn tension and emotional depth. They should feel the narrator's growing awareness of his own desires and vulnerabilities without overtly sexualizing the relationship. The key is to immerse viewers in subtle, relatable moments, lingering eye contact, shared silences, accidental touches that linger longer than expected, and small gestures that convey care and attentiveness. By the end of this section, the narrator is in a state of quiet realization. He is drawn to her not just for comfort, but for the recognition of his true self, his worth, his vulnerability, and his capacity to be seen. The audience senses that these observations are the seed of deeper emotional connection, setting up the tension and vulnerability necessary for the story's next phase, the emotional confrontation and breaking point. The weight of humiliation has been building for weeks, a quiet storm that simmers beneath the narrator's calm exterior. He has replayed the laughter, the pointed words, and the faces that glanced knowingly at him, all while trying to reclaim fragments of his self-worth. Yet nothing prepares him for the moment when he must finally face the woman who cut him so deeply, his wife. It begins quietly, almost casually. Perhaps they are in the living room, the late afternoon light slanting through sheer curtains, casting warm, golden rectangles on the floor. Or maybe it is a small gathering where he suddenly finds her presence unavoidable. The room feels both familiar and hostile. The smell of her perfume, floral yet sharp, lingers in the air. His palms are damp, his fingers tightening around the edge of a chair as he steps toward her. The soft creak of the floorboards under his feet feels louder than it should, echoing every heartbeat. Her expression is as confident as ever, the same half-smile, as if the world is a stage and he is merely an actor in her script. But this time, he is no longer passive. There is a fire beneath his composed exterior, a quiet resolve forged from weeks of reflection and the small kindness of the confidant who reminded him of his worth. He confronts her, not with rage, but with controlled honesty. His voice is steady, though it carries the weight of long-suppressed pain. "Do you realize what you said? How it made me feel?" he asks, each word deliberate, each pause intentional. The room seems to shrink around them, the air thick with tension, every sound amplified, the faint ticking of the clock, the distant hum of traffic outside, the subtle rustle of the curtains. Her laughter comes, sharp and cutting, but now he meets it with something different, a calm, unwavering gaze that doesn't seek permission or approval. The narrator notices the contrast between her confidence and his newfound composure. His chest tightens, but it is no longer panic, it is the steady beat of someone reclaiming control over their own narrative. Small details heighten the tension, the way her hand moves slightly as if to emphasize her words, the subtle curl of her lips, the tilt of her head. He feels the familiar sting of betrayal, yet it is tempered by a sense of self-assuredness he hadn't possessed before. He refuses to shrink under her judgment. Instead, he stands tall, shoulders back, voice calm but firm. For the audience, this confrontation is cathartic. They feel the narrator's internal struggle, the lingering shame, the simmering anger, the steady emergence of self-respect. Every sensory detail amplifies the moment, the warm light on the floor, the slight brush of air as she shifts, the sound of their breaths in the tense silence. By the end of this scene, he reaches a personal turning point. He may not need her approval, her validation, or her laughter anymore. He recognizes his own worth, his own strength, and the beginnings of a path toward emotional healing. This confrontation is not merely about vindication, it is about reclaiming himself, setting the stage for the tender bond that will follow with the person who truly sees him. The audience is left on the edge of anticipation, sensing that the story's emotional core is about to deepen into connection, trust, and possibly romance, built on the solid foundation of self-respect and honesty. After confronting his wife and reclaiming a fragment of his dignity, the narrator begins to notice a subtle shift in himself. The humiliation no longer defines him, instead, he carries it as a quiet reminder of how far he has come. And at the center of this transformation is her, the confidant who noticed his pain when the world seemed blind, the woman whose presence has slowly become both comforting and magnetic. It begins with small moments of connection. Perhaps they meet at a local cafe, the rich aroma of coffee beans mingling with the faint scent of baked pastries. Or maybe it's a rainy afternoon, droplets pattering against the window, their soft rhythm a backdrop to their conversation. The narrator finds himself leaning slightly closer, drawn to her warmth, noticing how her hair catches the light, the gentle curve of her smile, the subtle cadence of her voice. Each detail is grounding, intimate, yet entirely appropriate for the YouTube-friendly tone. They talk for hours, about trivial things at first, mundane topics like books, movies, or work, but gradually the conversation deepens. He shares moments of self-doubt he has never voiced aloud, and she listens without interruption, her eyes steady, her expression open and non-judgmental. There is a reassuring weight to her presence, the kind that makes the world outside fade away, leaving only the quiet, shared space between them. Their gestures are subtle, yet charged with meaning. A gentle hand brushes his arm while passing a napkin, a fleeting touch that lingers slightly longer than necessary. They share quiet laughter over small jokes, their smiles reflecting a warmth that he hasn't felt in months. At times, their knees brush under the table, an accidental closeness that sparks a flutter of tension, leaving both aware of a connection that is growing stronger with each interaction. He notices how naturally he can be himself around her. No pretenses, no need to defend or explain. Her calm attention allows him to shed the layers of embarrassment and self-doubt he carried for weeks. Even the smallest physical contact, a reassuring hand on his forearm, a brush of hair from her shoulder, feels like a balm to the raw edges of his emotions. These moments are deeply human, YouTube-safe, and profoundly intimate without needing overt romance. The environment mirrors the emotional warmth of the moment. Sunlight filters softly through the window, casting golden patterns on the table. The hum of the cafe, distant chatter, and the occasional clink of cups create a soothing soundtrack, framing their growing closeness. The tactile details, the warmth of a cup in his hands, the smooth surface of the table, the soft weight of a blanket if they linger at home, enhance the sensory richness, making viewers feel fully immersed in the scene. By the end of this part, the narrator is no longer defined by humiliation but by the quiet joy of connection. The emotional intimacy he shares with her becomes a source of strength, a safe space where he can heal. For the audience, these moments cultivate empathy and anticipation. They feel the slow-burn tension, the subtle romantic undertones, and the reassurance that this connection is built on mutual respect, understanding, and shared vulnerability. This tender bonding sets the stage for the story's resolution, the narrator's growth, the solidification of emotional intimacy, and the possibility of a lasting bond that is both nurturing and transformative. The audience is prepared for the final emotional payoff, whether it culminates in romantic fulfillment or a profound sense of emotional closure. The final chapter of the narrator's journey begins with a sense of calm he hasn't felt in months. The storm of humiliation, shame, and self-doubt has begun to settle, leaving him with clarity and a renewed sense of self. Walking through familiar streets, he notices details he had long ignored, the warmth of sunlight on his shoulders, the gentle sway of tree branches in the breeze, the faint chatter of neighbors passing by. These small sensory moments underscore how much he has changed. He is present, grounded, and aware of the beauty in the world around him. He meets her, the confidante who helped him rebuild his sense of worth, at a quiet cafe, the soft aroma of coffee and pastries wrapping around them like a gentle embrace. Their conversation flows naturally, light and warm at first, then deepening into moments of shared reflection. He speaks of the lessons learned, the strength discovered in confronting humiliation, and the gratitude he feels for someone who truly saw him when the world overlooked his pain. She listens, her expression open and empathetic, her eyes soft with understanding. There is a comforting intimacy in their interactions, subtle yet profound. A hand brushes against his while reaching for a cup, a soft laugh punctuates a shared memory, and the occasional lingering glance speaks volumes without a single word. These gestures are tender, emotionally charged, and YouTube-safe, evidence of the slow-burn bond that has grown naturally from trust and empathy. Every detail, the warmth of sunlight on their faces, the hum of background conversation, the smooth texture of the table under their hands, anchors the moment, making it tangible for the audience. As they walk together afterward, perhaps through a park or along a quiet street, their proximity is comfortable, deliberate, yet unforced. The narrator feels a sense of security in her presence, a quiet affirmation that he is seen and valued. Their steps fall in sync, the soft brush of her arm against his side a small but meaningful connection. He reflects on the journey that brought him here, the humiliation endured, the inner battles fought, the small moments of kindness that ultimately healed him. The story's emotional resolution is layered. The narrator has reclaimed his self-worth, no longer defined by his wife's harsh judgment. The bond with the confidant is gentle, warm, and mutually nurturing. For the audience, this is a moment of catharsis. They witness the full arc of vulnerability, struggle, and eventual triumph. The tension built over the previous parts finds release in subtle yet powerful gestures, eye contact that conveys trust, smiles that speak of shared understanding, and hand touches that echo the intimacy of their emotional connection. Depending on the narrative choice, the ending may take one of several paths. Together and secure, they acknowledge their feelings and begin a relationship rooted in respect and emotional depth. Together but uncertain, they admit a connection, leaving the future open but promising emotional honesty. Emotional resolution without romance, they part as friends or mentors, carrying the bond forward in a meaningful, platonic way. In any case, the audience feels closure. The narrator has transformed from a man crushed by humiliation to someone confident, self-aware, and open to meaningful connection. The story closes with a sense of hope and fulfillment, leaving viewers emotionally satisfied while reinforcing themes of resilience, empathy, and the quiet power of human connection.